My name is Mary, and I grew up in what most people would call a typical middle-class family. Mom worked as an accountant at a local firm, Dad was a project manager at a construction company, and then there was Daisy, my sister, 3 years younger than me. "Mary, you need to set a better example for your sister," Mom would say almost daily. "You're the oldest, you should know better." I heard that phrase so many times growing up that it became like a broken record playing in my head. Whether it was about keeping my room clean, getting good grades, or just general behavior, the expectations for me were always higher. I remember one particular evening when I was 16 and Daisy was 13. We were both sitting at the dining room table doing homework. I had my calculus textbook open, working through complex equations, while Daisy was doodling in her notebook, supposedly working on her English essay. "Mom," Daisy called out. "I don't feel like doing this essay. It's too hard." Mom came in from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. "Oh, sweetie, it's okay. You're trying your best. Maybe you can work on it tomorrow when you're feeling more inspired?" I couldn't help but scoff, remembering how different the response had been when I'd struggled with an assignment the previous week. "Is something funny, Mary?" Mom's tone had shifted completely. "No," I replied, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Just solved a problem." "Well, focus on your own work. You know you need to maintain those grades if you want to get into a good college." That was another sore point. From as early as I can remember, I'd dreamed of going to Princeton. Their computer science program was legendary, and I'd worked my butt off to maintain a 4.0 GPA, participated in every relevant extracurricular activity I could find, and even started a coding club at my high school. But when I brought up Princeton during my junior year, my parents shut it down immediately. "Mary, be realistic," Dad said during dinner one night. "Private colleges are expensive, and we need to save money for Daisy's education. You know she might need extra support. Your grades are good enough to get into any state school with a scholarship." Later that night, I sat in my room, staring at my Princeton brochure. My best friend Sarah came over and found me like that, cross-legged on my bed, surrounded by college materials. "They shot it down, didn't they?" she asked, sitting beside me. "Yeah," I sighed. "Apparently, I need to be realistic and save the college fund for Daisy." "But you know what? Fine. They want me to go to state? I'll go to state. But I'm going to make it work for me. I'm going to prove that I can make it on my own terms." Sitting there in my childhood bedroom, I made a pact with myself. I would succeed, not despite their limitations, but because of them. They had taught me one valuable lesson: if I wanted something in life, I would have to get it for myself. State University turned out to be exactly what I needed. I threw myself into my programming classes, often staying late in the computer lab long after other students had left. During my senior year, I had this idea that wouldn't leave me alone. I'd noticed how many people struggled with managing their daily tasks and routines. One night, while pulling another late study session, I started sketching out the framework for what would become Taskmaster, a revolutionary task management app that would change my life. I worked on the app between classes, during weekends, and even during holidays. When other students were partying or hanging out, I was debugging and refining my code. It became my passion, my obsession. After graduation, I took a huge risk. Instead of accepting any of the job offers that came my way, I decided to pitch my app to tech companies. Most ignored me, some politely declined, but then, tech giants showed interest. I'll never forget sitting in that boardroom, surrounded by executives in suits worth more than my entire wardrobe, watching as they tested my app. "This is impressive work," the CEO said, leaning forward. "Very impressive." The negotiations that followed were intense, but when the dust settled, I walked away with a check for $5 million. $5 million. I remember staring at the number in my bank account, my hands shaking. The first thing I did was buy a modest but nice apartment in a good area. The second was to start my own mobile app development company. The rest went into savings and investments. I wasn't about to blow this opportunity. When I told my family about the deal, their reactions were interesting. $5 million, Mom had to sit down. Are Mary? Dad just kept shaking his head, while Daisy stared at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. The dynamic shifted almost immediately. Suddenly, I wasn't just Mary the responsible older sister anymore, I was Mary the millionaire. And it didn't take long for that to become relevant. Just 2 years after I sold my app, Daisy graduated college and dropped her bombshell. I'm getting married, she announced during Sunday dinner. Tom proposed. I was genuinely happy for her. Tom seemed like a nice guy, and Daisy was glowing with excitement. Without hesitation, I offered to give her $20,000 for the wedding. Mom cleared her throat. You know, Mary, weddings these days are very expensive. I looked between them, confused. $20,000 is a lot for a wedding gift. But it's nothing to you now, Daisy said, her voice taking on that wheedling tone she'd perfected since childhood. And it's my only wedding. Don't you want your little sister to have her dream honeymoon too? We've been looking at this amazing resort in the Maldives. I sat there, feeling the familiar pressure of their expectations. The thing is, they weren't entirely wrong, I could afford more. And it was Daisy's wedding, a once-in-a-lifetime event. After some discussion and guilt-tripping, I agreed to pay for their honeymoon at the luxury resort in the Maldives on top of the wedding gift. After the wedding and honeymoon, a pattern started to emerge in my family's behavior that I couldn't ignore anymore. It was subtle at first, wrapped in jokes and casual comments, but it grew more obvious with each passing week. I bought Mom a designer handbag for her birthday. She smiled, but then said, "Oh, this is nice," though I saw a prettier one in the window of that luxury boutique downtown. But of course, this one is lovely too. Dad wasn't any better. When I helped him with some car repair costs, $1,000 for a new transmission, he chuckled and said, "You know, for someone who makes millions, you're pretty tight with your wallet." Could have thrown in an extra grand for new tires too. They meant these comments as jokes, but they stung. Each time I gave something, it felt like I was being measured against my bank account rather than my intentions. One Sunday afternoon, I was having coffee with Mom when she casually mentioned, "You know, your sister really loved that coffee maker you got her as a housewarming gift." Though she mentioned seeing a fully automatic espresso machine that would have been perfect for their morning routine. I set my cup down perhaps a bit too hard. "Mom, that coffee maker cost $500. Well, yes, but..." She waved her hand dismissively. "When you have as much as you do, what's a few hundred more between sisters?" Speaking of Daisy, she and Tom had been back from their honeymoon for 3 months, and they were still living with our parents. I found this odd, considering Tom had a decent job in finance and Daisy had started working as a marketing coordinator. "Why don't you guys look for your own place?" I asked Daisy one day while helping her organize her cluttered room, the same room she'd had since high school. She flopped onto her bed, surrounded by shopping bags from various boutiques. "Ugh, have you seen rental prices lately? It's ridiculous. We'd be throwing away money." "But you both have jobs." "Mary, not everyone can just buy an apartment outright like you did," she interrupted, rolling her eyes. "Some of us have to be practical." The irony of her calling living with our parents practical while surrounded by designer purchases wasn't lost on me. Mom had started dropping hints too. Every family dinner included some mention of the housing market. "Did you see that tiny house down the street sold for $500,000, she'd say, shaking her head. "It's criminal what they're charging these days. Normal people can't possibly afford to buy anything anymore." She'd always emphasize normal people while giving me significant looks. During one such dinner, she sighed heavily. "You know, when your father and I bought this house, things were different. Young couples could actually afford to buy homes. Now," she gestured at Daisy and Tom. "These poor kids don't stand a chance in this market." I dropped by my parents' house one Sunday afternoon, letting myself in with my spare key. The scene I walked into seemed oddly serious. Mom, Dad, Daisy, and Tom were huddled around the dining room table, papers spread out everywhere. They quickly shuffled them away when they saw me. "Oh, Mary, we didn't expect you today," Mom said, her voice a bit too bright. I caught glimpses of house listings and printouts of mortgage rates before they disappeared into a folder. "Just thought I'd stop by." "Everything okay?" "Everything's fine," Daisy chirped, but there was something in her voice I couldn't quite place. I didn't push it. If they were looking at houses, that was their business. Maybe Tom's parents had offered to help, or they'd saved up enough for a down payment. Either way, I was just glad they were finally planning to move out. 2 weeks later, Mom called. "Mary, we need to have an important family discussion. Can you come over tomorrow evening?" I immediately thought about her complaints about the refrigerator. She'd been mentioning it constantly, how it made strange noises, how the ice maker was broken, how food wasn't staying fresh long enough. When I arrived the next evening, the atmosphere was weirdly formal. Everyone was seated in the living room like it was some kind of intervention. Mom and Dad on the couch, Daisy and Tom in the armchairs, all facing the empty seat clearly meant for me. "Mary," Daisy started as soon as I sat down, her voice serious. "We've been having some family discussions." I nodded, waiting for the refrigerator request. "Tom and I have decided it's time for us to have our own home." "That's great," I said, genuinely pleased. "That's definitely the right decision." Daisy exchanged looks with our parents before continuing. "Well, since you're so successful now, and you have more money than you know what to do with." She paused for effect. "We've decided that you should buy us a house." The room went silent. I stared at her, certain I'd misheard. "I'm sorry, what?" "It makes perfect sense," Daisy continued, gaining momentum. "You have your own place. You bought it outright. Meanwhile, I'm still living with Mom and Dad. It's not fair." I looked around the room, waiting for someone to laugh, to say it was all a joke. But everyone's faces were dead serious. "I don't understand," I said slowly. "Why would I buy you a house?" "Because you're my sister," Daisy's voice rose. "You live in your own beautiful apartment while I'm stuck here. You have millions in the bank. I need my own place, and I'm not going to waste money on rent. You have the means to help me, so you should." I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "I'll tell you what I can do. If you need money for a down payment, I can provide an interest-free loan. We'll do it properly, through my lawyer." "A loan?" Daisy leaped to her feet. "Are you kidding me? You're just jealous, because I'm happily married and you're alone with your precious money." The accusation hit me like a slap. "Jealous? I gave you $20,000 for your wedding and paid for your honeymoon in the Maldives. That money could have covered my living expenses for a year." "Oh, here we go," Daisy sneered. Poor Mary, always counting pennies, despite her millions. "You're pathetic." "I earned every cent I have," I shot back, my own temper rising. "I built my company from nothing. I live within my means and invest in my business. I have employees who depend on me, obligations." "Obligations to everyone except your family," Mom interjected. Her face was a mask of disappointment I remembered from childhood. "I'm ashamed of you, Mary. How can you be so stingy?" "Stingy?" I laughed incredulously. "I've given Daisy more money in the past few months than most people make in a year. And yet you live in your nice apartment while your sister has to live with her parents," Dad added. "What kind of sister are you?" I looked around the room at their hostile faces, my own family, looking at me like I was some kind of monster for not handing over hundreds of thousands of dollars on demand. Daisy stood up, smoothing her designer dress that I suddenly remembered was a birthday gift from me. "Here's how this is going to work. Either you buy us a house, a nice house, not some cheap starter home, or you're no longer part of this family. It's your choice." Mom and Dad nodded in agreement. Tom sat silently, looking uncomfortable but not disagreeing. I looked at each of them in turn, Mom, Dad, Daisy, Tom. These people who had raised me, grown up with me, and were now trying to extort me. Without another word, I picked up my purse and walked to the door. "Mary," Mom called after me. "Don't you dare walk out that door." I paused with my hand on the doorknob, but didn't turn around. Walking out that door meant losing my family, but staying meant losing something equally important, my self-respect. I opened the door and left, their angry voices following me down the driveway. The bombardment started almost immediately after I left. My phone buzzed constantly with messages and calls from Mom and Daisy. I finally read some of them after a sleepless night. "How dare you walk out on your family like that," Mom's first message read. "After everything we've done for you." That last part made me snap. I called her back, my voice shaking with anger. "Everything you've done for me? Like what exactly, Mom? When I wanted to go to Princeton, you told me to figure it out myself. When I needed help with college, you said I should be independent. I worked 3 part-time jobs during college, just to afford a tiny apartment with roommates. We raised you," Mom shouted through the phone. "We put food on the table, clothes on your back. That's called being a parent, Mom. It's the bare minimum. Everything else, my education, my success, my company, I built that myself. While you were saving money for Daisy's college fund, I was working my ass off to make my own way. Aunt Linda's birthday party was the following weekend. I almost didn't go, but she'd always been kind to me, and I didn't want to miss it because of family drama. When I arrived at the restaurant, Mom, Dad, and Daisy were already there, sitting at the far end of the long table. I took a seat near Aunt Linda, and for a while, everything seemed civil. Then came the toasts. Aunt Linda's friends had just finished a sweet tribute to her when Mom suddenly stood up, wine glass in hand. Her cheeks were flushed, she'd already had several glasses. "I'd like to say something," she announced. "About ungrateful children who forget where they came from." The room went silent. Horror dawned on Aunt Linda's face. "My daughter Mary," Mom continued, her voice bitter, "sits there in her expensive clothes, with her millions in the bank, while her own sister needs a house. She refuses to help family. She's become a selfish, greedy person who—" "That's enough, Helen," Aunt Linda stood up. "This is not the time or place." But Mom wasn't finished. "She owes everything to us, and now she won't even help her sister buy a decent home." "Oh my God," my cousin Rachel whispered beside me. "Is she serious?" Daisy jumped in, her voice shrill. "She made me get a lawyer's contract, just to consider helping with a down payment." "Her own sister." I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. "I gave you $20,000 for your wedding and paid for your honeymoon. You're demanding I buy you an entire house." The other guests sat in stunned silence, forks frozen halfway to mouths, as years of family dysfunction played out before them. "I know Mary's been more than generous," Aunt Linda said firmly. "She helped pay for Tommy's diabetes treatment last year, and Sarah's college books." Other relatives started chiming in. Cousin Mike mentioned how I'd helped with his car repair. Aunt Sarah brought up the time I'd paid for her emergency dental surgery. With each example, Mom's face grew redder. "So she helps everyone except her own sister," Daisy shrieked. I couldn't take any more. I walked over to Aunt Linda, hugged her tightly, and whispered, "I'm so sorry about all this. Happy birthday." Then I left, the sound of arguing voices fading behind me. Later, I learned that the party essentially ended after I left, with guests quickly making excuses to leave. Several relatives called me afterward to offer support. The Facebook notification popped up on my phone 2 days after the birthday party disaster. My cousin Rachel had tagged me in a comment, "Mary, you need to see this." I clicked through to my mother's page and felt my stomach drop. There it was, a public declaration for all to see. With heavy hearts, John and I are officially disowning our eldest daughter, Mary. Her selfishness and ingratitude have shown us that she cares more about money than family. From this day forward, we have only one daughter, our beloved Daisy. The post had dozens of comments, mostly from family friends expressing shock and confusion. I sat there staring at my phone, feeling oddly calm. They'd finally done it, turned their emotional manipulation into a public spectacle. Without hesitation, I blocked them all: Mom, Dad, Daisy, even Tom. Phone numbers, social media, email, everything. It felt like cauterizing a wound, painful, but necessary. 2 months of blessed silence followed. I threw myself into my work, started therapy, and began to heal. Then came the call from Aunt Linda. "Mary, your mother's been trying to reach you," she said, her voice concerned. "She says it's urgent. She seems desperate." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. Somehow, I knew who it was. "Mary," Mom's voice was thick with tears. "Please don't hang up." I stayed silent, waiting. "Everything's falling apart," she continued. "We're going to lose the house. The loan we took out for Daisy's wedding, we used the house as collateral. We can't make the payments anymore." My grip tightened on the phone as she continued. "Your father lost his job. We're barely making ends meet. Please, Mary, we need help. You're our only hope." "I'm your only hope," I repeated. "I thought you only had one daughter now." "You forced our hand," she snapped. "If you just helped your sister." "You're a stranger to me now, Mom," I interrupted. "You made that choice. Strangers don't get to demand money from me." Her voice turned ugly. "How dare you call your own mother a stranger? Have you no shame?" A bitter laugh escaped me. "Shame? You publicly disowned your daughter because she wouldn't buy your other daughter a house. A mother doesn't disown her child over money. A mother doesn't try to manipulate and shame her daughter into submission. You made your choice. Now live with it." I hung up before she could respond, my hands shaking but my resolve firm. The truth came out during a Sunday brunch with Aunt Linda, 3 months after Mom's desperate phone call. "Your father's not unemployed," she said, stirring her coffee. "He just switched to part-time work because he wanted a better work-life balance. And there's no bank threatening to take their house. They made it up to guilt you into giving them money." I should have felt angry, but instead, I felt oddly relieved. The manipulation was so blatant, so transparent, it somehow made everything clearer. Through the family grapevine, I learned that Daisy and Tom had finally moved out of our parents' house and into a rental apartment. Apparently, they were saving for their own place, exactly what they should have been doing all along. "They still talk about you at every family gathering," my cousin Rachel told me over lunch. "Daisy goes on and on about her selfish millionaire sister who wouldn't help her own family." "How do the others react?" Rachel laughed. "Honestly? Most people try to avoid inviting them nowadays. Nobody wants to spend holidays listening to them complain about you and their difficult lives." It was during that conversation with Rachel that something clicked inside me. I'd spent years trying to prove myself to my family, trying to earn their approval while simultaneously serving as their personal ATM. But their love had come with conditions, price tags, and endless demands. That evening, I made a decision. I called up Sophie, my old college roommate who'd become a personal stylist. "I need a change," I told her. "A complete transformation." The next few months were a whirlwind. Sophie helped me revamp my entire wardrobe, replacing my practical programmer clothes with pieces that made me feel confident and powerful. I started seeing a high-end cosmetologist who helped me develop a skincare routine that made me glow. I got a new haircut, shorter, edgier, more me. But the changes weren't just external. I started saying yes to things I'd always been too busy or too cautious to try. When my friend Jessica suggested a spontaneous weekend trip to Paris, I went. When my coding buddy Mark invited me to join his rock climbing group, I gave it a shot. I expanded my social circle, joining a book club and a women's entrepreneurship network. I started mentoring young programmers, especially girls who reminded me of myself at that age. My company continued to grow, and I found myself surrounded by people who appreciated me for who I was, not what I could give them. 1 year after Mom's Facebook post, I received an invitation to my cousin Tommy's wedding. My parents and Daisy would be there, but for the first time, the thought didn't fill me with dread. Last week, I was going through some old photos and found one from my college graduation. I barely recognized the girl in the picture, so eager to please, so desperate for approval, so afraid of standing up for herself. I thought about how she'd feel knowing where she'd end up, successful, strong, and finally, gloriously free. I took that photo and put it in a frame on my desk. Not as a reminder of what I'd lost, but of what I'd gained. Sometimes, walking away isn't an ending, it's a beginning. Sometimes, the family you're born into isn't the family you're meant to keep. And sometimes, the greatest act of self-love is simply saying no to those who treat your boundaries like suggestions, and your love like an ATM.
Ew, raising some old hag's brat? Gross. You can deal with that yourself. Jason looked at me with disdain and hurled those unbelievable words. After 3 years of fertility treatments, we were finally expecting. And he said this about our child. He had often spoken hurtfully before, but this time it felt like my insides were boiling. Understood. Anticipating something like this. I had prepared a divorce form in advance and now thrust it in front of Jason. What? Apparently, he hadn't thought I would actually initiate a divorce. As his eyes widened in shock. Despite his blatant infidelity, why did he seem so surprised now? I've filled out what I needed to, you just finish up and take it to the office. Thanks. As I spoke, Jason, probably unable to back down due to his male pride, reluctantly signed the divorce papers. My name is Kristen Owen. I'm 39 this year. I live with my husband, Jason, and we've recently conceived a new life. At 3 months pregnant, I'm deep into morning sickness. But having wanted a child for so long, this pregnancy has been a joyful event for me. Yet, there was one thing ready to ruin my happiness, Jason. At the beginning of our marriage, Jason treated me with utmost care. Can't believe I'm married to such a beauty. My life isn't so bad after all, he would boast to people around us. And I would feel both embarrassed and delighted whenever someone teased him saying, "There he goes again." Honestly, I was quite popular with men when I was younger. Not that I ever slacked off on pursuing beauty. Every day, I researched what makeup, hairstyles, and fashion would suit me and even appeal to women. As a result, I now run an online beauty salon and am launching a cosmetic brand from home. While I do make a decent income as a sole proprietor, I haven't fully disclosed my earnings to Jason. When I try, he dismisses it with, "You're just playing around on social media all day." Initially, he used to admire me greatly, but now he mocks me as an old woman. And laughs saying, no matter how hard an old hag tries, her skin will just wrinkle up. I don't know what changed in Jason's heart. Perhaps he's always scorned others and I just never noticed it. We met through a dating app, and since we had no mutual friends, I knew little about his true character. Jason is a year older than I am. Remembering how thrilled I was to find someone my age on the app, I quickly reached out, and we hit it off and agreed to meet. After several dates, we began a relationship, and 3 years ago, when I was 36, we got married. When we married, tears nearly overwhelmed me. I felt like I was finally seizing happiness at this age, after having been merely a casual fling to many men before. When you fall in love like I do, you end up being convenient for men. But Jason was different, or so I thought. What went wrong? Our marriage seemed to go well only for the first 6 months. It turned out Jason wasn't new to marriage, he had been divorced twice. Though it seemed excessive, he looked so sad when he talked about his bad timing that I figured it was just unfortunate circumstances. Jason praised my looks and felt proud to be married to me. He worked at a furniture factory and was always exhausted when he came home. Despite not earning much and nearing despair as he approached 40, marrying me seemed to lift his spirits. Sometimes he would go out drinking with colleagues, and inevitably, a drunken Jason would hug me and thank me for marrying him, which became a regular scene. Jason's colleagues watched his behavior with amusement during our early months of marriage, which were filled with a kind of wedding high. We lived a comfortable life, splitting the living expenses equally from our salaries. Whenever I suggested paying more, Jason, perhaps out of male pride, insisted on keeping it equal. In reality, I earned more, but I never fully disclosed my income to avoid hurting him. The first shadow over our married life appeared about 6 months in, when I began to think about wanting children. I wondered what Jason thought about having children. At 36, I felt an urgent need to start trying for a baby. One night, I mustered up the courage to ask Jason, "Do you think we could start trying for a child?" Jason was in a good mood, just out of the bath and drinking a beer. But at the word child, his body tensed visibly. "A child, huh? Okay." His flat response surprised me a bit. Jason had been married twice, but never mentioned children. It seemed he wasn't opposed to the idea. "Thank you." Although I was puzzled by his ambiguous attitude, we decided to start trying for a baby. But at 36, I knew it might not be easy on my own, so I quickly started going to a clinic. Given my age, I was briefed on artificial insemination and in vitro fertilization. But not wanting to burden Jason financially, I opted to try timing intercourse first. I would visit the clinic weekly for ovulation predictions, and then we'd time our intimacy accordingly, which supposedly increased our chances of conception. I immediately shared this with Jason, who grimaced visibly. "What, so the doctor decides when we do it? That really doesn't motivate me at all." Jason's cold words stung. I was the one who wanted this, and while I could accept some forcefulness, it seemed timing intercourse was an unwelcome approach for Jason, who had only just begun to consider having children. I understood his feelings, but I wished he hadn't expressed them in front of me. "I'm sorry, but this is the least expensive way and increases our chances the most. It's tough, but let's work on this together." I tried to keep the mood light. "All right. So we can get pregnant quickly with this timing method, huh?" "Well, it's just for a little while, so fine." His words weren't exactly enthusiastic, but at least he hadn't lost all motivation. And I breathed a sigh of relief. Thus, I managed to persuade Jason, but reality wasn't so kind. I diligently informed Jason of the schedule the doctor gave me. But in practice, we only managed intimacy once a month. I didn't expect it every week, but once a month wasn't enough to conceive. Realizing this, I timidly approached Jason again. "I know it's hard, but could you maybe try a little harder? Of course, it's fine when you're tired. But at this rate, it might take a few more years, and that feels overwhelming." It took a lot of courage to express my feelings to Jason. But without initiating things myself, I had no choice but to wait for him to be in the mood. Jason, just back from work, listened to my plea and scratched the back of his head, looking annoyed. "What? Why should I be told what to do? This was your idea to begin with. Plus, I'm tired from working every day. It's not like you, staying at home and having an easy job. Don't order me around when you don't even earn much." His harsh words made me swallow hard. He had always been somewhat resistant to the idea of fertility treatments. But this was the first time he had reacted so violently. I couldn't bring myself to retort further and remained silent. I understood Jason's feelings, which is why I had tried to be careful in how I spoke. However, it was infuriating to hear him deliberately bring up my work to put it down. That day ended on a knife edge. And I couldn't bring myself to sleep in the same bed as Jason. Alone in my blanket, I stifled my cries and wept. Could I ever have a child? I had hoped it would be with Jason, who had once loved me. But perhaps God has decided not to bless me with a child. Despite the uncertain days, I continued with the fertility treatments with Jason for 3 years. My friends from school days were now busy raising 2 or 3 children each. Yet I was still unable to conceive. My heart was worn thin, and I had resolved that if it didn't work out the next time, I would give up. A month later, miraculously, I became pregnant. When the doctor confirmed my pregnancy at the hospital, I was so happy I almost jumped for joy. The doctor, knowing I had been coming for 3 years, rejoiced with me, saying, "Congratulations." That day, I rushed to tell Jason the moment he returned from work. "Jason, we did it. We're having a baby." I conveyed my gratitude to Jason, who had cooperated all this time, with a voice full of emotion. However, Jason merely muttered indifferently, "Ah, that's good," as if it concerned someone else. I thought he might at least share the joy since we had worked on this together. But perhaps he was just tired from work today, so I forced myself to be satisfied. Now that I was pregnant, I began to live carefully, avoiding alcohol and raw foods. However, Jason did not seem to care about my condition, and increasingly drank alcohol openly in front of me. "Ah, sorry. You can't drink, right?" Realizing he was deliberately drinking in front of me knowing I couldn't, honestly made me angry. And as I reached 3 months of pregnancy, I began to suffer from morning sickness and spent more days bedridden. I left work to my assistant staff and decided to rest for a while. "Sleeping again? You have such an easy job, yet you're such a lazy wife. Just a burden." Jason would throw these cold words at me as he left for work, while I struggled with morning sickness. I had no energy to resist, always feeling drained in bed. Seeing Jason say whatever he liked without showing any concern for my suffering made me very sad. After all, he calls me a burden, but I pay for the groceries too. We split the living expenses evenly, so I'm paying for my own share. Therefore, the fact that I'm not eating as much should technically save on food costs. There's no point in cursively trying to insult someone with baseless words. Despite being dismayed by Jason's attitude, I had intended to continue the marriage. I thought it wasn't right to force a life without a father on my child, due to my circumstances. Plus, there was a slim hope that Jason might change his attitude once the child was born. Holding on to that sliver of hope, I continued to battle my morning sickness. Then one day, while I was bedridden as usual, I heard Jason return home and open the front door. "Ah, next time until morning, yeah." Hearing Jason's voice on the phone shocked me. He seemed drunk, speaking a tone higher than usual, talking to someone on the phone. His voice sounded affectionate, like one might speak to a lover. And my heart pounded in response. I do feel bad about it. I'm technically married, after all. Please wait a little longer. I plan to leave her soon. Despite me lying in the room, Jason was loudly talking on the phone. Not only that, I was speechless when I heard the word leave come out of Jason's mouth. Could it be? Even though we just found out we're having a child, is Jason planning to leave me? And from the phone conversation, it was only natural to suspect that Jason was having an affair. Okay, got it. See you tomorrow then. I love you. Jason's whispers of love left me trembling. How could he boldly do this here, especially while I'm suffering from morning sickness? I could have stormed out of the room and confronted him. But if he simply denied having proof of the affair, that would be the end of it. I regretted not recording the phone call earlier. I decided to calmly gather evidence of Jason's affair before enacting any retribution. I will not be manipulated by you anymore. A month has passed since I started investigating Jason's affair. The investigation was going smoothly. I had gotten over my morning sickness and was able to work energetically as before. Just yesterday, my assistant gave me some surprisingly good news. With this momentum, I was determined to work hard. As usual, facing my computer in the room. One night, Jason had not returned home even late into the night. So I messaged him asking, "When are you coming home?" But he didn't read the message for a while. Eventually, giving up on waiting, I decided to go to sleep first. But just then, the front door opened. Overtime was so tiring today. Jason entered the house mentioning overtime. But it was hard to believe he had been working overtime until this hour. The scent of perfume was on Jason's suit, and I sighed in dismay. So, there's no overtime at this hour, right? Were you perhaps out with another woman? Having gathered evidence of Jason's affair, I confronted him more boldly than usual. Huh? A woman? What are you talking about? Jason tried to play dumb, but I could see through his lies. But I deliberately chose not to bring up the affair right then. Hey, look. Here, I got the ultrasound video from the checkup today. See how lively the baby is? I brought up the baby unexpectedly to gauge Jason's reaction. If he showed even a little excitement about the baby, I might reconsider the affair. But to my talk about the baby, Jason snorted and said dismissively, "Ew, raising some old hag's brat? Gross. You can deal with that yourself." Jason looked at me with disdain and hurled those unbelievable words. After 3 years of fertility treatments, we were finally expecting. And he said this about our child. He had often spoken hurtfully before, but this time it felt like my insides were boiling. Understood. Anticipating something like this, I had prepared a divorce form in advance and now thrust it in front of Jason. I had planned to present the divorce form after discovering Jason's affair. But it ended up being used sooner than expected. If we were going to divorce eventually, it didn't matter when I handed it over. What? Apparently, he hadn't thought I would actually initiate a divorce. As his eyes widened in shock. Despite his blatant infidelity, why did he seem so surprised now? "I've filled out what I needed to, you just finish up and take it to the office." Thanks. As I spoke, Jason, probably unable to back down due to his male pride, reluctantly signed the divorce papers. The next day, I took the signed divorce form to the office to file it. Thinking that our marriage had ended with just a piece of paper felt anticlimactic. When I returned home, Jason was already at work. So I quickly began packing my belongings into a suitcase. Jason would undoubtedly say, "Get out of this house." Not wanting to engage in a futile argument, I decided to return to my parents' home immediately. I was lucky I could work with just my computer. However, since I was paying the mortgage on this house, I went to arrange for the mortgage payments to be deducted from Jason's account. After completing the procedures, I took a deep breath and boarded a train to the neighboring state where my parents lived. By the time I arrived at my parents' home, I was exhausted and could barely move when I sat down in my familiar room. "What's the matter, coming back so suddenly?" I showed up at my parents' home without notifying my mother. Seeing me like this, my mother naturally asked a question. Actually, I told my mother about everything that had happened with Jason. How things were good at the beginning of our marriage. How his derogatory comments towards me increased once we started trying for a child. Yet, I held on to a faint hope that things might change once the baby was born. So I endured. But recently, Jason's affair came to light, and I left him and the house. My mother, who thought my relationship with Jason had been going well, was shocked by the appalling truths I revealed. However, after I finished speaking, she said, "I had no idea such things were happening. Kristen, you've had it tough." At the same time, she was visibly angry, despite her calm tone. "I can't believe Jason would do such things." Well, yeah. It's also my fault for not standing up to him. But this time it was too much. It's better for the child if I divorce him rather than let them grow up with such a father. I shared my honest feelings with my mother. She agreed with me, saying, "That's true." That day, I rested and ate my mother's comforting home-cooked meals. My father, who came home from work, was surprised to see me but greeted me warmly, "Welcome back." Touched by my parents' kindness, I was moved to tears, grateful I had left Jason's house. A month has passed since I started living at my parents' house. Life with my parents was like watering a dried-up flower. It soothed my troubled heart. Since my mother is a homemaker, she could take care of me all day when I was unwell. Preparations for the incoming baby were going smoothly, and I felt content. Work was also going well, thankfully. The sales of my cosmetics were consistently increasing. Although my assistant staff worked at the office, they sometimes visited my parents' house to discuss future strategies. Without Jason, unnecessary worries decreased, and I felt healthier both mentally and physically. I hope to continue riding this positive wave in both my work and personal life into my maternity leave. That's when it happened. While I was working in my room as usual, my smartphone rang. Assuming it was a work-related call, I checked the caller ID, expecting it to be a client or staff. But, unbelievably, the screen displayed Jason. Why is he calling me now? Is he going to say something nasty again? Unable to stop my suspicions about Jason, I decided to ignore the call. After a while, the ringing stopped, but 3 minutes later, Jason called again. Ignoring it wasn't helping, it just interrupted my work. Reluctantly, I touched the call button on my smartphone. "Can you stop calling me repeatedly? It's interrupting my work and distracting me." Although that's how I started the conversation, Jason just arrogantly replied, finally answered, "Huh. What do you want?" Jason's annoying behavior irked me, but I wanted to get off the phone as quickly as possible. I asked him rapidly, "Kristen, what's going on with the house mortgage?" Jason's voice echoed through the phone in a near frenzy. If he called after such a long time just to talk about the mortgage, I could explain and end this quickly. Since you and your affair partner are living in that house, it's only natural you pay the mortgage, right? Didn't you know I had been paying it? It's not that expensive, and you two can handle it if you combine your earnings. While married, I couldn't speak strongly to Jason. I was grateful that he took me in my late 30s. But now it's different. The snide remarks and his attitude during our fertility treatments still haunt me. Now that we're divorced, I can stand up to Jason. What? Wait, I can't pay the mortgage with my factory job. Well, then have your girlfriend pay for it. That's, Jason's voice faltered. As I listened, wondering what was going on, Jason blurted out a shocking truth. Emma changed completely the moment we got remarried. Plus, she was seeing another guy. And had accumulated a massive debt from loan sharks because of it. Then she ran off after making me her guarantor for her debts. From the start, I was just a decoy to saddle me with her debts. While she was involved with another man, damn it. I could hear the sound of him stomping in frustration. His anger palpable through the phone. Emma was presumably the woman Jason had an affair with. They had remarried after he and I divorced. And now she had tricked him into a one-sided debt, and he was now turning to me for help. Loan sharks meant exorbitant interest rates and severe collections. Although I thought Jason was foolish, I didn't feel the slightest pity for him. I've realized something. You're the only one for me. You're the only one who truly loved me, cooked for me, and took care of me. So, please, I'm begging you, marry me again. You're earning well with your job, right? I was wrong to belittle you for it. I won't say terrible things anymore. Wouldn't you and the baby be happier if you married me? At first, I thought he was merely begging to remarry me, but when he said, "You'd be happier if you married me," from a position of superiority, I felt indescribable irritation. Who would be happy marrying you? I retorted with a trembling voice, and Jason responded cluelessly, huh? So, it's you and the baby in your belly. Having a father around is better, right? Besides, no matter how much you earn, you can't raise a child without me, can you? Despite pleading for us to remarry. I thought this man's inability to shed his pride was utterly foolish. If it's about money, unfortunately, you needn't worry. Actually, a beauty influencer joined the online beauty salon I run. They're very popular on social media, and the products they promote sell out in a day. Thanks to that, my customer base has probably tripled from when I lived with you. Every day, new members sign up, which I'm truly grateful for. Also, the cosmetics brand I launched is selling like crazy. Influencer? Online salon? I could imagine Jason tilting his head at these unfamiliar terms. I had told him about the online salon before but hadn't gone into detail. So it was natural that he didn't know. Yes. It's different from being a salaried worker. So you might not be able to imagine it. Just because I stay at home doesn't mean my job is easy. So, I can raise this child without your help. Oh, and about you having an affair, I could even claim compensation for the damage I got. I had a detective gather lots of evidence. So please give up. And I'll be expecting the child support monthly. As I said this in a deliberately cheerful voice, Jason seemed confused as if to say, "What are you talking about?" and repeated, "Compensation. Child support? Oh, surely you know about compensation and child support, right?" Yeah, I know. But why should I pay that? The one who should be paying compensation is Kristen. For stressing me out during our fertility treatments. Yes, compensation. Pay it now. Listening to Jason's nonsensical remarks, I felt nauseous. It's pathetic that a grown man misunderstands what compensation means. How could I have ever fallen for such a man? I wondered incredulously. Listen, you don't understand anything, do you? Compensation is something I receive because you cheated and exploited. Why do you think you're entitled to it? Don't you have any common sense? Child support is the same. This child is also yours, and since your infidelity is why they'll grow up without a father, it's only natural you pay child support. After all, I have to raise them. As I stated the facts in a much lower voice than usual, it seemed that Jason finally grasped the severity of the situation. And he stammered, seriously. If you understand, then I'm hanging up. I'm busy, unlike you, who has nothing to do after being dumped by your woman. Thinking I didn't want to continue this fruitless conversation with Jason, I tried to hang up quickly. Wait. The conversation isn't over. I really messed up. I'm sorry. So please forgive me. At Jason's last plea, all I could do was sigh. Jason, who always lived conveniently for himself, must have been dumped by his previous wives for similar reasons. That's why, even at 40, he still behaves without any moral compass. Finally understanding this, I felt clear and managed to hang up the phone. Well then. After the call ended and the silence followed, I noticed my heart rate was elevated. Exhaling slowly, I felt somewhat relieved. When my phone rang again shortly after, I immediately set Jason's number to block. Now, I won't get any more nuisance calls from Jason. In the newfound peace, my heart gradually calmed. A few weeks later, through a lawyer, I successfully received $30,000 in compensation from Jason. Hearing that he would also pay child support monthly, I felt filled with joy for winning against Jason. According to what I heard through acquaintances, after being burdened with debt by his remarried partner and the compensation he paid to me, Jason desperately resorted to stealing products from the furniture manufacturing plant he worked at and sold them privately for less than the retail price. Once discovered, he was naturally fired from the company. Since then, jobless, penniless, and womanless, middle-aged Jason seemed to have fallen into despair, indulging in cigarettes, alcohol, and gambling, a typical fall into darkness. I haven't heard anything about him since. The old Jason is long gone, and knowing more wouldn't benefit me. I can only imagine, but Jason probably won't be able to hold a decent job anymore. Once dismissed for misconduct, he'll be tainted in the industry, and he'd have to disclose it on his resume. Living as a part-timer might be all he can manage now, but even that seems unlikely for him now. The price he paid for tormenting me and chasing after young women was indeed too high. But having been trampled on by Jason, I honestly feel quite refreshed. On the other hand, as my due date approaches, I'm preparing my heart to become a mother. Being a single mother is certainly daunting, but now I have strong allies in my parents. Of course, I can't rely on them completely, so I plan to work hard and give back to my parents. Thanks to the influencer effect, PR projects from major cosmetics companies are pouring in, and I'm riding a wave of success. It was lucky, but it's all thanks to the support from those around me. We're increasing the staff and strategizing to approach new customers. I think I'll be busy with childcare for a while, but when I return to work, owning my own store might be nice. The future looks very bright and exciting. I'm truly looking forward to what's ahead. My name is Emily Johnson, and I'm 37 years old. As a designer, I'm enjoying a fulfilling life. Next year, I'm set to marry the man I love, and while I am at the peak of happiness, the truth is that I went through a divorce 4 years ago. My ex-husband, Tom Swift, is a year older than me and works as a pilot for a certain airline. At that time, he mainly handled international flights. About 6 months into our relationship, Tom proposed to me on my birthday. "Emily, I promise to make you happy. You're the only woman for me, now and forever. Will you marry me?" "What? Tom? Are you serious? You're not joking, right?" "Of course not. I'm serious. I love you, Emily." A proposal after just 6 months of dating. Normally, one would need some time to respond. I was taken by surprise, but just like Tom, I had no doubts about our future filled with love and happiness. I didn't need any time to think about my two-word response. "Yes, please." On our way back, still buzzing with excitement, Tom added, "Let's go to the registry office tomorrow. We can't risk changing our minds. I want to be with you right away." "Don't worry, my feelings won't change. You never know. I can't live without you, Emily." Tom has always been the assertive type. He had been the one pulling me along in our relationship, even when I was hesitant. That night was full of surprises, but I was completely drawn into Tom's pace. And we actually submitted our marriage registration the very next day. I informed my parents over the phone. And while they were a bit worried about us getting married after just 6 months of dating, they eventually gave their blessing. 6 months of dating? Aren't you just swept up in the moment? Do you really know him well enough? "Dad, it's fine. Tom is a reliable person. Trust me." "Well, all right then. Be happy." "Thank you, Dad." Back then, I wasn't just swept up in the excitement of love. Tom had previously shared his background with me. I got here on my own. I didn't have the money or connections to attend flight school. I sacrificed time with friends and focused solely on studying to get into the airline. Even after joining, I worked hard to stay at the top. Tom had lost his parents when he was young and was raised by his grandparents in a modest household. I admired him for his determination to pursue his dreams. But now, looking back, I think we may have rushed things a bit. The day we submitted our marriage registration, I canceled my apartment lease and moved into Tom's place. "Our new life together is starting," Tom said excitedly, and I couldn't help but smile shyly. "Let's always keep our home bright and happy. The wedding is going to be amazing. I can't wait to see you in your wedding dress, Emily." We really did get married, didn't we? Things moved so quickly that sometimes I couldn't believe we were actually married. It took about a month to find the perfect venue. And just as we were about to start choosing the dress and other wedding preparations, something changed. Tom's attitude shifted drastically after we visited my parents. I need to properly greet Emily's parents. I was so happy at the time that I might have been a bit disrespectful to them. Yes, they were worried about us getting married after only 6 months of dating. We need to reassure them as soon as possible. So, that weekend, we planned a visit to my parents' home. Tom, who usually wasn't nervous, seemed unusually anxious that day, even buttoning his jacket incorrectly. By the way, my parents live in Ohio. When we finally arrived in the late afternoon, I was excited to be back home. But as soon as Tom saw the house, he suddenly said, "Wait, is this your parents' house, Emily?" "Yes, that's right." "What's wrong?" At that moment, I couldn't understand what Tom meant by his comment. Nothing, really. My parents had prepared delicious fish and local dishes for us, and I felt nostalgic enjoying the flavors of my hometown. However, Tom's behavior was a bit odd. He seemed tense, hardly speaking while we were at my parents' house. And even made some condescending remarks like, "There's really nothing around here. It's quite plain, isn't it?" His mood didn't improve after we returned to the hotel. When I asked him what was wrong, he just replied, "Nothing." I was confused by this unfamiliar side of Tom, but I thought it would pass with time. Unfortunately, even after returning to New York, his mood didn't change. "I'm really busy with work, Emily." "You are too, right? And about the wedding, let's call it off." "What? Are you serious?" "Yeah, I mean, how are we supposed to plan it when I'm hardly ever home?" "Well, you don't have to worry about it. I can handle the planning." Even though I tried to reassure him, he said, "I don't want to spend all that money on something that lasts just 2 hours. To be honest, I've lost interest in having a wedding." So, we ended up canceling the ceremony. Tom, being a pilot for international flights, was often away from home. But after that, he almost never came back. When he did, he was distant, barely acknowledging anything I said. I felt invisible. Not long after, I found out I was pregnant. I was terrified about how to tell Tom and how he would react. But I thought maybe this could bring us closer again. I decided to tell him over the phone. Tom was silent for a while. "Hey, we're having a baby. Don't you have anything to say?" "Oh, not really." My heart was breaking. "Tom, you don't seem very happy about it." You're so annoying." "I'm busy, I gotta go." He hung up, leaving me staring at the phone in shock. The nausea from morning sickness, combined with Tom's coldness and my fears about the future, pushed me into a deep emotional spiral. Although I told my parents and 2 close friends, I kept it a secret from my workplace. The stress was unbearable. I couldn't eat and buried myself in work to hide my loneliness. As a result, within 2 months, I suffered a miscarriage, losing the baby in a devastating wave of bleeding. I informed Tom by email, but he never replied. A year later, after enduring our estranged life, I began to consider divorce as a possibility. But it seemed I wasn't the only one. One day, Tom left without saying a word, leaving only a signed divorce paper on the table. I couldn't think of any reason for the way Tom had been treating me. If I had to pinpoint a moment, it would be when we visited my parents' house. "Wait, this is your parents' house, Emily?" His tone had been slightly condescending. Even after we entered the house, Tom looked around as if he had seen something repulsive, which had bothered me. Though I had been considering divorce myself, it was because our marriage had become unbearable. But that didn't mean I hadn't dreamed of a happy married life. When I saw the divorce papers, I collapsed in shock. Desperate for an explanation, I called Tom with tears streaming down my face. "Yeah? What's up?" It was the first time I'd heard Tom's voice in a while, and it was still as indifferent as ever. His cold, sharp tone cut through me. Gathering my courage, I asked for the reason. "Tom, why?" "Why?" "You know why. I've fallen out of love." "I'm not asking why you want a divorce. I want to know why you fell out of love. You're not the woman I thought you were, Emily. But your attitude changed suddenly after you saw my parents' house. We were having fun on the train ride there. But as soon as we arrived, everything changed." "Why?" "If you really want to know, I'll tell you." Tom snapped, getting angry as I mentioned how his attitude had shifted. "After visiting my parents' home, the woman who's with me needs to be perfect. I've worked my way up here solely on my own abilities. Do you understand? I'm perfect now. My wife has to match that perfection. If my wife's family lives in such a shabby house, it lowers my value. It's too embarrassing to even mention. I can't be associated with a poor and dirty background. Got it? Ah, so that's why you wanted to cancel the wedding. You were embarrassed by my parents? I was more shocked than angry and couldn't say anything more. Whatever. I've got another woman moving into the apartment. So you need to be out by the end of the month. With that, Tom ended the call abruptly. As for me, as you might imagine, I broke down in tears. The pain of realizing that my love with Tom was truly over, coupled with the shock of being spoken to so cruelly, overwhelmed me. I couldn't process it and just cried until my pillow was soaked. At that moment, I thought I'd never recover. 2 months later, I pushed my feelings for Tom deep into the recesses of my mind and headed to Australia to attend my cousin's wedding. It was an international flight, so there was a chance I might run into Tom at the airport. I felt a strange mix of fear and curiosity about seeing him again, combined with a desire never to see him. But fate has a way of playing tricks on us. As I was heading toward the airport lounge where I was supposed to meet my family, I heard a familiar voice from behind me. I turned around and saw Tom. Our eyes met, and I quickly tried to escape into the lounge. But it was too late. Tom grabbed my arm. "What are you doing here?" "None of your business, Tom." I shook off his hand. That hurt. "Do you even know where you are? You tried to run from me, but this lounge is for first-class passengers only." "I know that. I'm meeting my family here." "Are you stupid? I told you, only first-class passengers can enter here. Do you even know what first class means? Don't insult me." "Of course, I know what first class is." "Exactly, so you should know you can't get in here without paying a hefty fare. There's no way your poor parents could afford that." I couldn't hold back my anger any longer. "It's none of your business. And stop with the poor nonsense. What on earth are you misunderstanding?" And then, there was the flight attendant standing next to Tom, laughing quietly the whole time, completely disrespectful. Especially since I'm still technically a customer. I shot her a glance. Tom noticed and said, "Oh, her? She's my new wife." I couldn't believe my ears. It had only been 2 months since our divorce was finalized. What? It's only been 2 months since our divorce, right? So what? Are you going to cry about it and try to get alimony? Too bad for you. Catherine's also an international flight attendant. So we've known each other for a long time. Ridiculous. So that's what this was all about. I'm truly disgusted. Can a person really change so much? Or maybe this was who Tom really was all along, and I was just blind because I was in love. Then Tom, as if I had asked, started talking about more things. Catherine's father is a state senator. When I met her parents, their house was a mansion. Nothing like your parents' place. Yeah, whatever. In the end, it was all about status for Tom. I was too disgusted to even respond. How could I have fallen in love with someone like him? I felt ashamed of myself. But what surprised me more was how Catherine seemed. Completely unfazed by Tom's words. "Hey, is this the woman who was Tom's ex-wife? Wow, Tom, I didn't know you liked short-haired women too. What is this woman talking about?" Tom is practically stating that the only thing that matters to him is her family's status. And she's worried about the length of my hair? It's almost impressive that she managed to become a flight attendant. And her family's poor, right? She's a dirty woman with dandruff, isn't she? So gross. First of all, what on earth did Tom tell her? Dandruff? That's a wild exaggeration. What kind of woman has he made me out to be? And as for Catherine, as I've said, I'm still technically a customer. It's beyond ridiculous. I'm not poor, and I take a bath every day. Oh, really? I thought you didn't. And even if I were poor, so what? Is status more important to you than love? You didn't even know anything about my family when we first met. Yeah, that's the thing. I made a mistake. Emily, you're a designer, and you're stylish, so I never expected your family to be that poor. I couldn't tell if that was supposed to be a compliment or an insult. This is just unbelievable. In any case, the two of them were completely absorbed in their own conversation. And I started to feel foolish for engaging with them. Just then, Tom suddenly took off his hat and straightened himself. Catherine, the woman next to him, did the same. Confused, I turned around to see what was happening. And that's when I heard a voice behind me. Emily. It was my grandfather. He had come to join us in the lounge before we boarded the flight to attend my cousin's wedding. Oh, Grandpa. Grandpa? Is everything all right, Emily? Is there a problem? No, it's nothing. I just ran into some people I know. You go on ahead, Grandpa. All right, I'll go inside then. I encouraged my grandfather to enter the lounge ahead of me. Wait, that's your grandfather, Emily? No way. Yes, why? That suit he's wearing is from a high-end Italian brand. It must have cost around $3,000. Is that so? I don't really know much about men's fashion. Emily, is your grandfather wealthy? What does he do? Well, he's the chairman of a major corporation, but why does that matter? Oh, and by the way, my parents may live in an old house, but they're both doctors. My father is a professor of surgery at a national hospital. And my mother runs her own medical spa. The house you insulted as poor and dirty? It's their way of keeping themselves grounded and not letting their status control them. But looking at how you've behaved, it seems like it was a good thing I took you there. Emily, I'm sorry. I didn't know. I said some terrible things. Catherine, I want a divorce. Emily, please marry me again. I promise I'll make you happy. Wow, Tom, that's so mean. Was Tom always this fickle? This was the second time I'd heard those words. The first was when he ignored me for a year and left without a word. Now, the moment he realized my family had money, he flipped his attitude completely. It was so absurd that I suddenly felt all my feelings for Tom disappear. The man standing in front of me was not the Tom I once knew. I'm really sorry, Emily. I wasn't thinking straight back then. The one who wasn't thinking straight was me. Is this the real you, Tom? I only said those things because I thought you were poor. So, you change your attitude towards people based on their wealth? Do you enjoy looking down on others? And weren't you poor yourself once? In my anger, I blurted out something I shouldn't have. I'm sorry, Tom. I didn't mean it like that. Yeah, I was poor, okay? And so were you. Tom's tone suddenly softened, and he spoke in a cold yet sorrowful voice. As we were going through this farcical exchange, my parents arrived at the lounge. The moment they saw Tom, my father's face lit up in recognition, followed by a furious expression. You. So you're the one who hurt my precious daughter. He looked ready to throw a punch, but my mother held him back with all her strength. Emily's miscarriage was your fault. And you ignored her for a year just because you thought we were poor? Calling her a dirty and poor woman, how could you be so rotten? Don't you feel ashamed as a man? No, No, the one who was really rotten was me. Even though the face Tom showed me is like that of a completely different person now. The fact that I once loved someone like him is honestly embarrassing. Just then, my grandfather received a message from my parents saying they had arrived. And he stepped outside the lounge to greet them. What's all this commotion about? Grandpa. Why is there so much yelling? Did this pilot do something? Dad, did something? This man is Emily's ex-husband. At my father's words, I could see the terror in Tom's eyes. He was frozen solid, like ice. Ex-husband? Is this the guy? And he's one of our pilots? What? Our pilots? Yes, for our airline. I'm the chairman. Chairman? Tom was trembling from head to toe. Why didn't you tell me, Emily? Oh, I guess you didn't mention it, Emily. Well, I didn't want to trouble Grandpa, and honestly, it felt weird to bring it up like gossip. But why did you invite me to that rundown? Oh. I'm sorry. Your family's home. Oh, the house? Yeah, I guess it's understandable you'd think that just from looking at it. But Mom and Dad decided to keep it as is because they find it comfortable. And for some future reasons. They do have another house in the city, but we just invited you to our family home. Because it seemed like the right thing to do at the time. Why didn't you say anything? Would it have changed anything if I had? So, my status was all it took to change your feelings? Guess you never really saw me for who I am. I'm better off without someone like that, anyway. Gah. The truth is, my grandfather and I are very close. He knew all about my divorce, and he was the one who supported me through it. I didn't mention to him that Tom was a pilot at the same airline. Because I didn't want to add to Tom's burdens. But now, the moment had come. My grandfather, thinking Catherine was just a flight attendant, said, "This is a family matter, so you should leave." Yes. Excuse me. Catherine hurried off, unable to hide her surprise. I was so disgusted that I had no intention of defending Tom anymore. I told my grandfather the truth, that Catherine was Tom's new wife. Wait, you just got divorced, didn't you? And now you've already married someone else? What do you think you're doing? Hurting my granddaughter and then rushing into another marriage? My grandfather was as furious as my father. Did you cheat on Emily while you were still married to her? Well, no, sir. There was this younger flight attendant, and when I got divorced, I was really upset and confided in her. Before I knew it, she became someone close to me, you know? That's how it happened. Lies. How can you stand there and lie so easily? It's unbelievable. I relayed everything Tom had just said to me to my parents and grandfather. They were both visibly furious, their lips pressed tightly together, struggling to contain their anger. But the sheer childishness of the situation left them at a loss for words. If I weren't your boss, I'd probably punch you right here and now. Grandpa, it's okay. I realize now that I was seeing a different Tom all along. I've completely gotten over it. I had never seen my grandfather so angry before. He told Tom and Catherine, "We will discuss this matter with the family." and ensure that Emily receives the compensation she deserves for the pain she's suffered. Remember that. Understood? With that, he led my parents and me into the lounge. A few days later, I received a call from my grandfather. Emily, how are you holding up? Have you heard anything from that man? He sent me some pathetic excuse-filled emails, but I've ignored them all. I see. I wish I could find a way to make him pay for what he did. My grandfather was still upset and worried about the incident that day. But I had already gotten over it. He's usually a calm and rational man, never one to wish ill on others. But it seems that, no matter how old I get, I'm still his precious granddaughter. He was determined to make Tom face the consequences, even if it meant stepping down as chairman for my sake. I tried to calm him down, but deep inside, the thought of Tom going on with his life as if nothing happened made me angry too. Grandpa, how about this? I'm not sure how it will turn out, but I'll hire a lawyer. So, out of the options my grandfather suggested, I chose the one that would cause him the least trouble, demanding alimony from Tom. However, I didn't have any concrete evidence that Tom had been cheating. I knew about the new woman before we finalized the divorce. But I hadn't recorded anything, so it wasn't solid proof. At the same time, my grandfather became curious and started asking other flight attendants and pilots in Tom's international flight department about his relationship with Catherine. What started as a simple fact-finding mission for his granddaughter quickly turned into a serious company issue. When one of Tom's fellow pilots said, "That guy's a womanizer. He's always asking the flight attendants and even some passengers for their phone numbers." This comment triggered a major internal investigation. Whether that pilot let it slip accidentally or intentionally exposed Tom, it wasn't clear. But according to my grandfather, Tom's arrogant attitude, boasting about being an international pilot, hadn't won him many friends among his colleagues. Tom ended up facing multiple interviews as part of the investigation. Realizing he couldn't escape, he confessed to misconduct with passengers. He even admitted, "I thought Emily's family was poor, and marrying her made me feel like I was still poor. That's why I approached Catherine, whose father is a state senator, to boost my status." That testimony, along with other evidence, confirmed that Tom had been unfaithful while we were still married. I successfully sued him for $30,000 in alimony. Honestly, I didn't want the money, but as my lawyer explained, it was the only way to hold him accountable. Tom didn't just lose his reputation, he also lost his position as a pilot. Although he wasn't fired outright, he was removed from flying duties due to his violation of company policy and disruption of workplace morale. Now, Tom works in a department where he has no contact with passengers or flight attendants. After losing his job as a pilot, Catherine left him and they divorced. It seems that, just like Tom, Catherine had married him for his status. In a way, they were a perfect match for each other. A while later, I met up with some close friends, and we ended up talking about Tom. "Emily, that must have been tough. Are you okay?" "Yeah, I'm fine now." "That's good to hear. By the way, was Tom really a different person after you started dating? Which version of him was the real Tom?" "You know, I've thought about that too. Even though I've gotten over it, there's something that still bothers me. When I said something really harsh to Tom in anger, his face looked so sad. And according to my grandfather, Tom said during one of his interviews that he felt like he was still poor after marrying me. That stuck with me." "I see. I wonder if people really change when they get money. Well, it doesn't really matter now. Cheers. Tom had dreamed of becoming a cool pilot during his student years. He studied relentlessly and worked hard to achieve that goal. But once he did, he became arrogant. Many people lose their humility when they start getting attention from others. Maybe Tom needed the same kind of reminder that my parents had. With their home, a way to keep themselves grounded and not let status and power take over. Tom's hard work went to waste, and now he's living alone in a small apartment, eating instant noodles for dinner. As for me, I'm planning my second wedding for next year. I met my fiancé on the flight to Australia for my cousin's wedding. He was on the flight for a vacation, and we hit it off right away. After 4 years of dating, we're getting married next year. Both our families are thrilled for us. And we recently went on a family trip to Florida together. And, actually, our family is about to grow. In May next year, we'll be welcoming a new addition. Yes, I'm expecting a baby. Everything is going smoothly, and I'm currently 26 weeks along. At the last checkup, we found out it's a boy. Both of our families are so excited that they've already started shopping for baby clothes and shoes, even though it's a bit early. My fiancé suggested that we name our son after my grandfather, who's now watching over us from above. Grandpa, I'm doing well. You don't know who I am? My ex-husband Richard Hanson's mocking voice filled the entire room. Beside him, unable to hide her smile, was my sister, Ashley. You and Sean are just second-rate, after all. Richard and Ashley were clearly mocking Sean and me. And who do you think I am? Sean's retort marked a complete reversal of roles. After all, Sean is. I am Tracy. I work as a medical office administrator. I'm turning 47 this year and take pride in my job every day. I decided to pursue a career in medicine during college, overcoming many challenges along the way. My current position is, in part, thanks to the support of my husband, Richard. Tracy, you can definitely do it. Thank you. But I'm anxious every day. What if I fail the exam? Don't think about the bad stuff, just believe in yourself. We met in college and pursued a career in medicine together. Richard, shall we go home together today? Of course, Tracy. Richard was a kind and dependable figure. I was truly happy when he proposed. Richard, I'm looking forward to our future. Yeah, Tracy. With you, any future is fine. In my late 20s, when Richard proposed, I was truly happy. However, a certain tragedy struck our blissful life. 20 years after the proposal, a certain event occurred. While living an ordinary life, Richard said, I have something to tell you. Tracy, there's something I need to tell you. What's wrong? You look serious. Actually, I think we should break up. What? Why all of a sudden? Actually, I've decided to marry Ashley. The moment Richard's words reached my ears, it felt as if my world had stopped. What? Why all of a sudden? It must be some kind of joke, right? We've been married for about 20 years. Well, you know, we've been in a rut lately. My voice trembled. My heart pounded wildly, and my mind went blank. Ashley, you mean my sister? It was unbelievable. Hot tears streamed down my cheeks. Sorry, Tracy. But I'm happier with Ashley. Happy? What about our happiness? What about the promises of marriage? The dreams for the future? Questions flooded in, but I couldn't find my voice. Okay. Be happy. I replied with a calmness that surprised even me. But inside, a storm raged. Anger, sadness, despair, and a deep sense of loss. After Richard left, I sat alone in the room. Everything we had built seemed to crumble like a sandcastle. How should I live from tomorrow? But I couldn't just cry. I had my own life to live and had put in a lot of effort until now. I must start moving forward, little by little. That night, I decided to start a new job and a new life. Later, I changed my workplace and dedicated myself to my job in a new medical office setting. As life at the new job began, I slowly started looking forward again. Months passed, and working busily every day, my heart began to heal little by little. Good morning. Good morning, Tracy. Let's do our best today. Every time I saw a patient's smile, I felt good about choosing this job. But sometimes, loneliness would well up. I wonder how Ashley is doing. Why did Richard choose my sister Ashley? Was there something lacking in me? Thinking of my sister still pained my heart. Although I had cut off contact, part of me still wanted to see her. One day, a new patient came to the clinic. Tracy, please handle the new patient. Yes, I understand. The patient was a man with kind eyes. This is your first visit. Please fill out the questionnaire. Thank you. Excuse me. Yes? Do you have a question? No, I was just impressed with your courteous service. Thank you. It's only natural. You're rare, you know. Most people treat patients mechanically because they are so busy. Is that so? But I love this job. When I receive words of gratitude from patients, I feel glad I worked hard. The man smiled at me. I see. Please keep up the good work. Oh, I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Sean Foster. Mr. Foster, I am Tracy Wood. Since that day, he began visiting regularly, always speaking kindly to me. Ms. Wood, it's nice to see you again. Thank you. Mr. Foster, are you coming from work? Yes, I finished a bit early today. One day, he unexpectedly asked me out. Ms. Wood, if it's okay with you, how about we go out for dinner? Me? With you? Yes, of course. I wouldn't insist, though. After some hesitation, I decided to accept his invitation. Okay, I'd like to join you for dinner. Dinner with him was enjoyable. As we shared meals, we became closer and even changed how we addressed each other. Sean, what do you do for work? Actually, I also work in the medical field. Do you remember the first day we met, when I approached you? Maybe it's an occupational hazard. I tend to notice the attitude of nurses and doctors. So, you work in the medical field too? Yes, that's right. We talked about work and hobbies, and before we knew it, time had flown by. Tracy, thank you for the delightful time. Thank you as well. It's been a while since I could relax. After that, we began dating regularly. We went to the movies, walked in the park, and had coffee at cafes. Time with Sean was a healing period for me. One evening, while enjoying dinner together, I decided to open up about my past. Sean, I have something I want to talk about. What is it, Tracy? You can tell me anything. I took a deep breath and started talking about my past. I used to be engaged. His name was Richard, and we had been together since college. But he ended up marrying my sister. I might be wrong to tell you this. But I thought if it's you, Sean, I could talk about it. Sean looked surprised at first, but then he listened intently. At that time, I was really hurt, and I even cut off contact with my sister. Even now, thinking about her hurts my heart. Maybe there was something I didn't know about. I wonder if things would have been different if I had been more attentive. Tracy, that must have been hard. But you are strong. Despite such a past, you live looking forward. Sean's words brought tears to my eyes. Thank you, Sean. I'm really glad I met you. Tracy, I accept all of your past. Let's walk this path together from now on. I'll cherish you, no matter what. Does that mean? My heart might have conveyed its beating to Sean. I was that nervous. Yes, that's what it means. I will make you happy, Tracy. I accept everything about your past. So, will you marry me? Relieved by his words, I felt I could overcome any difficulty as long as Sean was with me. Yes, of course. I cried openly. I had been at rock bottom after my engagement was broken by Richard. But then, a prince appeared before me. From the day after Sean's proposal, everything in my daily life seemed colorful. Surely, the broken engagement had numbed my emotions. But Sean was undoubtedly the one who brought color back into my life. One day, Sean made a suggestion. Tracy, I'd like to go and greet your family. Really? Yes, I want to properly introduce myself to your family. I was a bit puzzled by his words because I hadn't resolved things with Ashley yet. But, about my family. Don't worry, Tracy. I'm here with you. Encouraged by Sean's words, I decided to introduce him to my family. On the way to my parents' home with him, I was a bit nervous. It had been a while since I had returned home, and my heart was uneasy. Hi. Hi, Tracy, how have you been? Oh, who is this? Sean. My boyfriend. My mother was surprised at first, but soon smiled. Nice to meet you, I'm Tracy's mother. Nice to meet you. My name is Sean Foster. Tracy has always been taking good care of me. At that moment, Ashley entered the room. Hi, Tracy. Oh, who is this? Sean, my boyfriend. Ashley showed a surprised expression for a moment but soon sported a cold smile. So even a medical office administrator like you got a boyfriend. Those words hurt me a bit. Afterwards, we all sat down for a meal prepared by our mother, enjoying a warm atmosphere. Sean, what do you do for work? I work in the medical field. In the medical field, huh? Do you work at a hospital? No, I work within a medical group. Ashley smirked disdainfully. Probably just a menial job, right? Menial, you say? Well, some might think that. I thought so. Oh, if I upset you, sorry. But, well, not to brag, but my husband is a doctor. He has more status, honor, and money than we know what to do with. Oh, don't worry. I'm not comparing. No, please, don't mind. Ashley seemed a bit irritated by Sean's composed demeanor. Seeing Ashley's expression reminded me of something. Ashley has to be the best at everything. She was like that even during our school days. She wouldn't pick her means for her ends. Then, the front door opened, and Richard entered. I'm home. Sorry, I'm late even though Mom invited me. The moment I saw Richard, my heart nearly stopped. I never imagined we'd reunite at my parents' home. Oh, Tracy? Richard. Richard showed a moment of surprise, then a cold smile appeared. I was just about to have dinner with Ashley and her mother. Never thought we'd meet up like this. By the way, Are you still working as a medical administrator? Yes, I am. So, you're still slaving away in the medical world every day. I noticed Sean twitch at Richard's words. Why did I have to run into Richard? Out of 365 days in a year, it had to be today. Regardless, Sean, who also works in the medical field, must have disliked Richard's words. Ashley ran up to Richard and intertwined her arms with his. Richard, Tracy and Sean are here too. Richard looked at Sean with a look of disdain. Oh, you're Tracy's new boyfriend. Medical field, huh? What exactly do you do? Surgery? Or maybe a small clinic? Well, I can guess most of it without asking. Sean answered calmly. I am involved in medical work. Richard laughed through his nose. I thought so. Not exactly a place you can proudly claim, right? You're engaged to Tracy, after all. It must be some low-level job. I'm a medical director, so you understand. I own status, honor, and wealth. Everything. We might show a nice face to patients, but this is the real face of a doctor. It's a good learning experience for you guys, isn't it? Yes, Richard is a talented doctor. Tracy, you as a medical administrator, are nothing like him. That's right. Medical administration is a job anyone can do. Sean, your job must be nothing special, right? You match my sister, after all. I felt anger at those words, but Sean remained calm. Was this the hidden side of my former fiancé? Had marrying Ashley changed him, or had I just not noticed before? Is that so? You are a medical director. Richard nodded proudly. Not just any director. A superb doctor. Hey, Richard. Why don't you tell them about our new house? Oh, yeah. Richard and Ashley were beaming. We're moving to a luxury apartment. Tracy, you're probably never going to experience such a world. Listen and be amazed, it's a top location everyone envies. And guess what? Tell them, Ashley. It's the top floor. Every morning, we drink coffee while looking down on insignificant people. Keep up the good work at the bottom, for our sake. Oh, right. We've also been on several overseas trips. Tracy, you guys don't have that kind of leeway, do you? Just the other time, we went to London. First class. At those words, my heart ached. When I squeezed Sean's hand, he smiled at me kindly. That's enviable indeed. First class, impressive indeed. And a trip to London. Richard, you must be quite distinguished. Be careful with your choice of words when you say distinguished for a medical director. No, I didn't mean it that way. It must be an honor to work for such a company. At that moment, my mother said worriedly, Everyone, stop it now. However, Richard and Ashley did not cease. People at the bottom of the medical world, sitting at the same table with us. Truly. We're in a different class. Tracy, remember? Back in university, you studied so hard but you never became a medical director. That's right. You were always relying on Richard. Even for university assignments, you always relied on me. Well, I was still top of the class though. What can I say, maybe it's a difference in intellect. Why could they speak like this in front of my parents? I was simply bewildered. Sean, you ended up just like Tracy, unable to become a doctor, right? Sean answered calmly. I didn't become a doctor, but I support many people through my work in the medical field. That's just an excuse. An excuse of a loser who couldn't become a doctor. And, Sean, you said you support many people. In the medical world, it's doctors who support patients. Remember that clear difference. Right. Both you and Sean are just second-rate. People like you claiming to be in the medical field? Don't make me laugh. You're lowering the value of healthcare. I felt tears welling up, but Sean gently held my hand. Tracy, it's okay. Don't be swayed by their words. There's no first or second class in jobs. Then, my mother spoke again. Stop it now. Both Tracy and Sean are living admirably. Admirably? With such menial jobs? We are far more successful. Is this what they call the structure of society? Sean quietly began to speak. Richard, Ashley. I understand what you've been saying. If you understand, then just leave. Go home and study to become a doctor. Or should I take you by the hand and teach you? At Richard's words, Sean snorted. Then, we will take our leave now. Sean. It's okay, let's go. Days later, Sean was attending an important meeting at the city's largest general hospital. Good morning. As the other doctors nodded and returned his greeting, Richard took his seat. After a while, the chairman of the general hospital, Norman, entered the room. Good morning, everyone. Today, I want to discuss an important matter. Mr. Norman, I have a question before we begin. What is it, Dr. Hansen? Is someone from the group headquarters also attending today's meeting? Yes, indeed. Actually. At that moment, the door to the meeting room opened, and a man in a suit entered. As the man in the suit entered, Richard's eyes widened. Why? Good morning, everyone. Thank you for your time today. Ladies and gentlemen, this is our group's CEO, Sean Foster. The room buzzed. Richard stared at Sean in disbelief. Why? You. Dr. Irving spoke sternly to Richard. Dr. Hansen. Whom are you speaking to? Well, this is my ex-wife's current boyfriend. Richard, who did you think I was? Richard's face turned pale, and the atmosphere in the meeting room froze. Everyone, I apologize. Dr. Hansen and I know each other from before on a personal basis. Is that so? However, such an attitude is not appropriate. Well, yes, I apologize. Let's move on to the main topic. I want to discuss the management of each hospital. Sean began using the projector to show the management data of each hospital. Here are the results of the patient satisfaction survey for each hospital. The screen displayed the names of several hospitals along with corresponding graphs. It was clear at a glance that the graph for Richard Hansen's hospital was notably lower compared to the others. Dr. Hansen's hospital seems to have particularly low ratings from patients. Specifically, the issues raised include long wait times, doctors' responses, and the cleanliness of the facilities. Richard sank deeply into his chair. The concern is especially regarding the doctors' responses. Dr. Hansen? Have you been providing appropriate guidance to the junior doctors recently? Oh, yes, of course. However, it seems there are many complaints from junior doctors indicating that adequate guidance is not being provided. Other doctors looked at Richard with suspicion. Dr. Hansen, are you fulfilling your responsibilities as a medical director? No, well. Moreover, there seem to be issues with your work attitude as well. Looking at last month's attendance record, there are clearly many instances of leaving early and arriving late. Dr. Hansen, what is this about? That was, sorry, it was due to personal issues. Allowing personal issues to interfere with work is problematic as a professional. especially in a field where we are responsible for human lives. Richard was lost for words and just looked down. Everyone. Medicine is a critical profession that involves human lives. We have a duty to always prioritize our patients and provide the highest quality medical service. Everyone in the meeting room nodded deeply at Sean's words. To improve the current state of Dr. Hansen's hospital, I would like to implement several measures. However, before we discuss that, only Richard remained slumped in his chair. There is one important matter. All eyes in the room focused on Sean. Dr. Hansen, there have been numerous reports of inappropriate behavior in the hospital involving your girlfriend, Ashley. What are you talking about? Private meetings during clinic hours, Ashley harassing the nurses. And above all, actions disregarding patient privacy. These actions are absolutely unacceptable for medical professionals. The meeting room buzzed. Richard was taken aback but quickly assumed a defensive posture. Wait a minute. That's a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? What do you mean? I was meeting Ashley because she was ill. That's right. She came for treatment of her illness. During clinic hours? It was for symptoms that required immediate attention. And there was no harassment of nurses. Ashley was merely offering kind advice. I see. Advice from someone with no medical knowledge. And what about the breach of patient privacy? That was just sharing necessary information for the treatment of patients. Sometimes, that's necessary to improve the quality of healthcare. Richard rattled off his excuses as the tension in the room escalated. Dr. Hansen, I have heard everything you said. However, unfortunately, all of them differ from the facts. What do you mean? First, we checked Ashley's medical records. And there is no record of such emergency treatments. Next, multiple nurses have reported harassment by Ashley. Richard's face turned pale. And finally, regarding patient privacy. You shared specific patient information with Ashley in situations unrelated to their treatment. This is a clear violation of confidentiality. That can't be. Hey. Dr. Hansen, is this true? No, that is. We have sufficient evidence. Surveillance footage, testimonies from staff and patients. Richard's face turned stark white. Sean continued sternly. Dr. Hansen, I'm sorry, but these actions will have to be disciplined. We will deliberate on the specifics of the penalty. Is that clear? What? I think that's the right decision. Actions that undermine trust in healthcare are utterly inexcusable. I agree. Dr. Hansen, your actions are unfit for a doctor. Richard was speechless and just stood there stunned. Does anyone else have any comments on this matter? Everyone nodded, showing their support for Sean's decision. That concludes this meeting. Let's continue to strive to provide better medical services from tomorrow. As the meeting ended and people started to leave, Sean approached Richard. Richard, this is the result of your actions. You might want to consider disciplinary action as well. Richard's face turned red as he suddenly raised his voice. Shut up. What do you know? Please calm down. I am merely stating the facts. Don't make me laugh. Someone like you, an outsider, couldn't possibly understand my job. Do you have any idea how hard I've worked to get here? Just when I could see becoming the head of the department. What, is this harassment? Are you defending Tracy because her ex-husband is with her sister? Doing that won't get you anywhere. Please, don't make me laugh. I have no reason to harass you. There's nothing in it for me. Then why is this happening? You might want to think about that yourself. You're smart enough to be a medical director. You must be competent. I'm a doctor. I save people's lives. We're not even in the same league. Being a doctor, you should be humble. You're in a position of trust, holding people's lives in your hands. Shut up. Shut up. Shut up. Richard shouted while shaking his head violently. Shut up. You. People who can only look down on others have no right to lead. I had high hopes for you. Nothing has been decided yet, as of now. Listening to you talk like you're so important. Do you have anything else you want to say? You guys just order us around. Sitting comfortably in air-conditioned rooms, killing time. Why don't you do some real work? People like you, who live on titles alone, are frankly the trash of society. Just wait. In a few years, AI will take over everything. Richard, as if unhinged, hurled insults at Sean. Thank you very much for your opinion. And now, one last thing from me. Please apologize properly for hurting Tracy. Richard, you hurt Tracy. Moreover, the fact that you married Tracy's sister. How cruel that fact is to Tracy. Trying to elevate yourself by looking down on others is the ugliest act. However, you already have someone important in your life. And Tracy has a boyfriend too. The past cannot be changed. So, take this opportunity to genuinely reflect and hope to grow as a person. Alone in the empty conference room, Richard sat heartbroken. No one was there to save him. That day, Sean told me about the events of the meeting. I had no idea such things were happening. Thank you. I guess I've been quite a nuisance, haven't I? I don't think it's a nuisance at all. Richard was wrong. I don't know if it started before he met Ashley or after. But one thing is certain, he's not fit to be a medical director. What will happen to Richard? He'll probably be dismissed. That makes sense. I too have mixed feelings about my ex-husband's disciplinary action. Especially since his wife is my sister. Several months later, Sean and I happily got married. Sean, good morning. Are you up early again today? Yes, there are preparations for the new hospital. Good luck. I have a patient consultation today. Tracy, your work is impressive. I'm proud of you. The two smiled at each other and headed to their respective workplaces. Meanwhile, Richard and Ashley's lives had drastically changed. Following the meeting, Richard was dismissed. Damn, I failed another job interview. Richard, why has it come to this? Shut up. It's your fault. It's your inappropriate actions that cost you the position of medical director. You said you might have been head of the department in a few years if things had gone well. You interfered with my work. You plague. You're the root of all problems. Damn you. Their arguments escalated day by day. One day, as Tracy and Sean were walking through town, they spotted two familiar figures approaching. Is that Richard and Ashley? It seems so. He looks much thinner. As they passed by, Richard addressed Tracy. Tracy, you look happy. Yes, I'm incredibly happy. Tracy, we've decided to get a divorce. Tracy looked surprised. Really? Are you okay? Is there anything I can do to help? I don't need it. I don't want your sympathy. Richard was angry and tried to leave, but Sean calmly spoke up. If that's the case, then it's good. Richard. If you ever want to return to the medical field, feel free to consult me. Richard and Ashley looked surprised but left without saying anything. Sean, the idea of Richard returning to the medical field. Of course, it's not possible. But those two hurt you, Tracy. A little spite won't hurt, right? Tracy hugged Sean's arm and smiled happily. I am truly happy. Me too, Tracy. We'll always be together. The couple held hands and continued walking towards a bright future. Get out with your kids, old hag. The lover was standing in front of me, holding a 1-year-old child she had hidden away. I was dumbfounded by her condescending tone, but I replied, Fine. Here's the divorce papers. But I'm leaving the 3 kids behind. What? You take care of them. They are your kids, after all. That's right, fulfill your responsibilities as a mother. Even my husband started to berate me. Frustrated by their selfish remarks, I inadvertently let out a deep sigh and said, You're joking, right? Because these kids are. What? My words seemed to have caught them off guard. Now, it was my husband and his lover who stood with their mouths agape, staring at me in shock. Then, they made a foolish decision. Watching their shallow judgment, I sighed softly to myself. They didn't understand the gravity of the situation at all. Pitying them, I decided to contact someone. My name is Kate, and I'm 40 years old. Currently, I work from home and am actively seeking a spouse. I have devoted myself to my job since childhood to achieve my dreams. However, upon turning 40, I noticed that most of my friends were already married with children. Is this really okay? Once I started thinking about it, I couldn't stop. One day, I vented my frustrations mixed with sighs to a visitor at my home. The visitor, a work acquaintance and close friend who knew my personality well, replied with a wry smile. Well, I can't say for sure, but getting married might open up a new world for you. The acquaintance was a work-related contact, but our long association had evolved into a sort of friendship, and she knew my personality well. Her casual remark made me pause in realization. Maybe it will open up a new world. Those words were intriguing to me because of my profession. Of course, I didn't take marriage lightly. I've heard plenty of complaints from married friends, and encountered negative information about marriage daily through articles and television. Yet, my curiosity became uncontrollable, and that very day, I registered on several dating apps. Though it may seem frivolous, I've always lived by following my inquisitive nature and applying it to my work. This time, too, I acted on impulse. Little did I know what the future held. Among the messages I received on the dating app, one from a man named Ben Thompson, a 45-year-old employee, stood out. His messages were very polite, and I quickly took a liking to him. We shared hobbies, and our conversation flourished around books. As we continued to exchange messages, and just when I felt things were going well, Ben invited me to meet for a meal. I promptly agreed. That weekend, we had our lunch date. Ben was just as calm and composed as his messages had suggested. His gentle manner and kind demeanor made me wonder why such a wonderful man had been single until now. Curious, I asked him, and he replied with a slight, apologetic smile. Actually, I was once married and got a bit burned by the experience. Plus, work kept me so busy that I just got older without realizing it. Indeed, Ben was divorced, a fact noted on his profile page. Despite this, something about his photo had caught my eye, perhaps it was intuition. After comparing many other men's profiles, none attracted me as much as Ben. Meeting him confirmed my instincts were right. I strongly felt I wanted to date Ben. Our meal was delightful, and we quickly made plans for another date. 2 months later, Ben proposed to me. I was thrilled and agreed to marry him quickly. While I wondered about the speed of our engagement, I rationalized that at our age, there was no point in delaying. Given our ages, I'm not too fussy about having a wedding ceremony. If that's what you want, I have no objections. Overcome by embarrassment, I almost skipped the wedding preparations and decided to move in with Ben immediately. I wanted to start our married life as soon as possible. Thus, I quickly handled all the necessary procedures and moved into Ben's house. But before that, Ben and I had this conversation. "Sorry, but could you handle this while you're running your errands?" He handed me a marriage registration form, already signed by him as the applicant and guarantor. Understood. I'll submit it later. I took the documents, but with all the moving and paperwork, I forgot to submit them. As I planned to do it later, sudden work emergencies piled up. And I completely forgot about it until after I had moved into his house. Realizing this, I thought to myself, I must not forget to submit it later as I walked into his house. That's when something unbelievable happened. For the first time, I discovered that Ben had children. During the 2 months we dated, I had never been invited to his house. At the time, I thought nothing of it, but now it seemed there was a reason. And it was a bit of a shock. As I stood there dazed, Ben suddenly spoke in a stern voice. "Ah, yes. From now on, you'll also be taking care of the kids. Don't slack off." His tone had changed from before as he ordered me around. As I exclaimed, "What?" 3 young boys came bustling out from the back of the house. "Huh, so this is the new mom?" "What? No way, she's just the maid, right?" "Come on, Alex, that's harsh to say right off the bat to someone you just met." The 3 of them stared rudely at me and burst out laughing noisily. As I stood there, taken aback, Ben cleared his throat loudly. "Hey, cut it out, all of you." Upon his stern reprimand, the 3 boys chorused a belated okay. "These are my sons." From oldest to youngest, Chris is 18, Alex is 17, and Justin is 16. All are in high school, and Chris is a college applicant. Make sure you take good care of them. Saying this, Ben mentioned he was going to take a bath and left the room. I stood there for a while, dumbfounded, staring at the 3 boys. Then, they began to sneer and make belittling remarks again. "What's with that stupid look, old hag? Yeah, don't just stand there. We're hungry. Hurry up and get dinner ready, maid." With that, they each retreated to their rooms. I was left alone at the entrance, standing in disbelief. So much had happened all at once, and I couldn't keep up. I had been busy all day and was utterly exhausted. Glancing at my watch, I saw it was now 7 p.m. I finally entered the house and headed for the kitchen. Though told to make dinner without any guidance. It was my first time here and I didn't know where anything was. Sighing, I peeked inside the refrigerator only to find a few drinks and some condiments. How was I supposed to prepare a meal with this? Then, Ben, fresh from his bath, saw me standing lost in the kitchen and clicked his tongue in irritation. "You're slow." "Never mind, I'll order takeout for today. Don't bother cooking." "I'm sorry." As I apologized, hanging my head, he clicked his tongue loudly again and snapped. "Make sure you do your job properly tomorrow." He then stormed out of the kitchen, slamming the door behind him. His cold demeanor left me wanting to cry and also filled me with a strong sense of suspicion. Silently, I began to formulate a plan. That day, although Ben mentioned he'd order takeout, he only ordered for himself and his sons, not for me. The four of them sat around the dining table, enjoying their hamburgers, while I could only watch from the kitchen corner. Noticing my gaze, Ben spitefully remarked, "That's your punishment for not making dinner. Go eat some ready-made food from the store." Hearing this, I bowed my head and left the house. There was a convenience store nearby, I remembered as I trudged off to buy my dinner. When I returned with my ready-made meal, Ben and his sons had already finished their dinner and returned to their rooms. The remains of their takeout hamburgers were left untouched on the kitchen table. I sighed as I cleaned up and ate my bland dinner alone. I hadn't expected such treatment on my first day. Perhaps this marriage was a mistake. Despite wanting to flee, I reconsidered. My married life had just begun. Maybe if we lived together long enough, we could become a real family. With this hopeful thought, I decided to try harder starting tomorrow. However, such resolutions were quickly shattered. The three sons were all selfish, treating me more like a servant than family. "Hey, where's my gym uniform? I told you to wash it yesterday. You always forget, so useless. And my uniform shirt is still wrinkly, seriously annoying." Saying that, the three of them berated me daily and hurled insults. Initially, they refused to let me enter their rooms. Ben's house was fairly large, with many rooms, and each child had their own. When I first came to the house and tried to clean their rooms, the three of them found out later and were furious, shouting at me, "Don't just come in here. Yeah, you're so annoying. You didn't take any of our stuff, did you?" Frightened by their accusations, I no longer dared approach their rooms. They would leave their laundry scattered, sometimes forgetting to include items for washing, and then blame me when things were amiss. Unable to endure it any longer, I consulted Ben, but he dismissed me. "I'm busy. Don't bring such trivial issues to me." After moving in, he had dumped all household and child-related responsibilities on me. Suddenly, his overtime and business trips increased, and he was rarely home on weekends. Moreover, both he and his sons seemed to view my home-based work as nothing more than a hobby, openly disparaging it. "How long do you plan to continue with such nonsense?" Whenever I was at my computer, Ben would sneer and sigh exaggeratedly, suggesting I was just playing around. His lack of empathy deeply hurt me. "Please don't speak to me like that. Actually, I'm going to be quite busy with work soon. Could you help out a bit with the household chores?" One day, when I desperately needed time for work, I asked him this. He exploded in anger. "Work? The work you're doing is hardly significant. Focus on getting the housework done perfectly. If you can't manage that, then quit your job." His ferocity left me speechless. I had explained my work to Ben before our marriage, and he had agreed I could continue it. He even promised to share household duties when work got busy. Yet now, he was completely negating his earlier assurances. Feeling deceived, I was left hollow. From then on, I resolved not to discuss work anymore. Until our living situation stabilized, I would focus on the household, thinking that would be best. Besides household chores, there was something else that needed my attention. It was about the three kids. On the surface, they seemed like model students, but I soon realized they were quite troubled. At school, they behaved without any issues, but at home, They invited bad company and engaged in problematic behavior. What started as hidden drinking and smoking a few months ago had now become blatant in front of me. They would disguise themselves to go out at night, continuing their habits of smoking and drinking. Concerned by their actions, I rushed to consult Ben. But he chose to believe the children over me. After all, the children committed their misdeeds when Ben was not at home, and he easily believed their side of the story. Then he coldly said to me, "How can you say such demeaning things about your own children? I find your character, willing to falsely accuse them so easily, unbelievable." Ben's outright dismissal left me speechless, and seeing such a father. The children casually joined him in calling me terrible. "Dad, she was slacking off with the housework yesterday too." "Yeah, she seems to have been on the computer all day until we came back. The cleaning isn't done properly either. We can't concentrate on our studies like this." Then my husband scolded me fiercely, being continuously blamed by both my husband and the children. I gradually lost my place in the home. Amidst this, I faced even further misfortune. Taking advantage of their father's trust, the sons not only looked down on me but also started pinning their own misdeeds on me. And they reported this to Ben. "Hey, Dad. She was stealing money from your wallet." "What? Is that true? There's no way I would do that." I desperately denied the accusation, but the children, smirking, didn't listen to my explanations. In the end, under the coercion of Ben and the children, I had to pay a substantial amount of money as compensation to avoid further punishment. This was how I was terribly treated by Ben and his 3 sons, enduring in silence. However, my silence was not out of resignation but to bide my time, waiting for the right moment to strike back. Although my feelings for them had nearly vanished, running away from this house would leave a bad taste in many ways. One day, about a year into the marriage, I noticed that among the friends hanging out with the sons, there was one who was always treated like a servant. Whenever he came to our house, he was always sent to the nearby store to buy drinks and snacks. That day, I quietly followed him as he was about to leave the house. "Hey, you don't need to go buy anything. I've got some drinks and snacks prepared for you." When I spoke to him, he seemed relieved and stopped going to the convenience store. He thanked me politely and introduced himself. His name was Fred Johnson. He was a classmate of Justin's since their freshman year of high school. "Things were good at first," Fred said softly. According to him, the boys hadn't always been this way. But their behavior escalated around the time the oldest was preparing for college entrance exams. Eventually, the sons began targeting Fred. He really wanted to stop hanging out with them but couldn't seem to get away. That's why he was relieved when I approached him. A month later, he confided something important to me, and I offered to help him discreetly. While I was dealing with the sons' issues behind the scenes, a change occurred between Ben and me. A month after I started consulting with Fred, a woman suddenly appeared at my doorstep with a baby. She bluntly said to me, "Hello, ma'am. My name is Emma Brown, and this child is Ben's. I'll be straightforward. Could you divorce Ben?" As I stood there stunned by this sudden revelation, she impatiently made a derogatory remark. "Get out with your kids, old hag." Then Ben, who arrived late, agreed with his lover, pressing me to divorce. "I'm sick of living with an old woman like you." I was disgusted by their condescending remarks and replied, "Fine, I'll leave as you say. But I'm leaving the 3 kids behind." "What? You take care of them?" They are your kids, after all. That's right, fulfill your responsibilities as a mother. I let out a deep sigh in response to their selfishness and said, "You're joking, right? Because these kids aren't mine. Besides, I'm not even married to Ben." "What?" My words apparently shocked Ben as he stared at me, his mouth agape. Yes, I never submitted the marriage registration Ben told me to. On the day it was revealed he had hidden his children from me and pretended we were married, I harbored a strong distrust towards him. I decided to see how things would unfold and refrained from registering our marriage. While opinions may vary, I continued to hide this fact and maintained a marital relationship with Ben for a specific purpose. So, I don't need to take care of the kids. I firmly stated this and announced my departure from the house. Initially stunned, Ben soon smirked unpleasantly, and his lover laughed loudly. What? Then we're even spared the hassle of a divorce and property division. Watching their shallow reaction, I sighed silently to myself. They foolishly understood nothing of the situation's gravity. While pitying them, I contacted Fred, the friend of the son, to inform him of something important. 2 weeks after I left Ben's house, his lover came to see me, her face distorted with anger. "Hey, you! You deceitful woman! You knew those kids were terrible troublemakers, didn't you? You wicked woman!" She nearly lunged at me as she screamed these accusations. Yes, Ben had told his lover that the children were model students, and she had naively believed him. But in reality, they were far from it. "You knew they only acted like model students in front of Ben, didn't you?" She pressed me, demanding that I take the kids back. But I coldly told her, "This has nothing to do with me. Besides, they're causing even more serious trouble now." At my words, the lover burst into loud sobs. "I can't handle it anymore. Help me." With a sigh, I offered her some advice. "If you dislike it so much, why not just break up with Ben?" "But I don't want that either." She stomped her feet like a petulant child. "You dislike this and that, but that doesn't solve anything." I sighed again, exasperated. I closed the door on the lover who rejected all my suggestions, leaving her crying outside. Eventually, she quieted down. 2 weeks later, a book was released and became an explosive hit. It spread through word of mouth online, drawing significant attention. The story resembled my experiences with my husband and his lover. Indeed, the book was a novel I had written, based on my marriage to Ben. I am a romance novelist with a bit of a reputation in the field. My venture into a gritty drama of love and hate had caused quite a stir for its new style. I used social media to promote it heavily, sparking a major debate. Your new work is being highly praised as a fresh frontier. After some time, the acquaintance who had once told me that marriage might open up a new world came to visit, smiling broadly. Indeed, she was actually the editor responsible for my work. She knew my personality well, so perhaps she had anticipated this turn of events back then. If that was the case, it might seem a bit cunning. But since I went along with it, I couldn't really complain. Well, in a sense, it's like a personal novel, so maybe it's not something to be proud of. As I sighed, my acquaintance smirked and handed me an envelope. I took it with a puzzled look, and she said cheerily, "But it did help someone, right?" Suddenly recalling something, I hastily opened the envelope and pulled out the contents, a letter from Fred Johnson, a former friend of the son's. I quickly read through it and felt a profound sense of accomplishment as I exhaled in relief. The letter explained that Fred had been freed from bullying. Indeed, at the same time my book was released, the criminal activities of the former children had been reported with evidence. Thanks to Fred's carefully gathered proofs, this had led to the police detaining the boys. Because of the uproar, Ben also became a topic of gossip in the neighborhood. Many readers pointed out similarities to the novel and speculated online, quickly identifying personal details in today's digital age. It was terrifying how the novel's models were pinpointed to be Ben and his family, causing him to be whispered about by neighbors. Eventually, the boys were sent to a juvenile facility due to the severity of their actions, but their poor attitudes apparently led to them being bullied there. Ben ultimately lost his job due to the scandal spreading to his company, finding himself without a place. When the lover found out Ben was unemployed, she took the child and fled. It turned out her attachment to Ben had been more about his income than love. She was reportedly struggling to raise the child alone, working in a night job. Ben, unable to find regular employment due to the scandal, resorted to day labor. This marriage experience allowed me to write novels from a different perspective, though it might seem like I used my marriage to gain experience. I reconciled it with myself as acceptable. Though my time with Ben and his children was short, it seemed to have significantly grown me as a person. There might be others who suffer through worse marriages without being able to express their pain. I decided to focus on such people in my future novels. And with this experience, I aim to reach new heights as a writer, continuing to write works influenced by what I've gone through. Having set a new goal, I am now diligently working on a new piece at my computer.